Ferrari. It's F1's most historic and glamorous team. However, it hasn't won a title in 17 years since its 2008 Constructors' Championship victory. But this isn't just a drought, it's becoming quite the pattern for Ferrari. So, what exactly has happened over these years, and why does it seem like this pattern might never break for Ferrari? Hello, everybody. My name is Michael, and welcome back to Last to First. Now, there are four general themes across Ferrari's recent history that I want to talk about to pose why they haven't won a championship in quite some time and why it's not looking so good for their future as well. The first is, of course, Ferrari's strategy. The second are all of the times that there's been a lot of hype and it's turned into heartbreak for them. Third have been all of the development missteps and reliability failures. And lastly are different driver errors over the years that have cost Ferrari a lot of points in their championship bid. So first, let's get into some of the big strategy blunders that Ferrari have had over the years. One of the biggest reasons that Ferrari has become a bit of a laughingstock in the F1 paddock, and one of the reasons they haven't been able to properly fight for a title, is that they have just repeatedly failed to capitalize on their competitive cars due to poor strategic decisions. Going back as far as 2010 in Abu Dhabi, Alonso was leading the championship by 17 points going into the final race of the season. They made a mistake with the pit stop to cover Webber, and he got stuck in traffic, and it allowed Vettel to win the race and the title. In that scenario, Ferrari's conservative call really cost them the championship. 2018 saw a good deal of errors. Germany, they were very slow to react to the changing conditions, and of course, Vettel crashed out there as well. Hungary, they had poor pit stop timing and execution, and that put Vettel in traffic, which cost him a lot of time and points. Italy, they had a botched team orders, which favored the wrong driver. And in Japan, they had intermediates on a dry track. A really questionable head-scratching decision. So just in that 1 year alone, those were some big moments with a very competitive car in 2018 that really cost them the championship. 2022 was another really challenging year for Ferrari for the strategy team. In Spain, strategy cost Sainz multiple positions just for making questionable decisions. Monaco, of course, one of the biggest moments of Ferrari blunderness is when Leclerc went from P1 to P4 due to a stacked and delayed pit stop and changing conditions, and he was not overly pleased about that, losing out the win in his home race back in 2022. Silverstone, they left Leclerc on old tires during the safety car while pitting Sainz, and Leclerc fell back because his tires could not warm up after the safety car. Hungary, they opted for hard tires when all of the data clearly showed that they did not work. All of the other teams that tried it, it was just not working, and everybody knew that it did not make any sense to go on the hards, and Ferrari did it anyways. And of course, in Belgium as well, they pitted Leclerc for the fastest lap, and it caused him to lose a position, and he got a speeding penalty for it. So just some unnecessary mistakes there. Moving on to this year in 2025, really it's the same story, just a new season, and just continual heartbreak for Ferrari. In Australia, they left the drivers out on slicks in the wet for a bit too long. In China, they of course had a double disqualification for two separate reasons, which is really shocking. And then of course in Miami as well, they had really poor team order management that just caused some unnecessary drama for them as well. So everybody knows the memes of the Ferrari strategy wall, and those are just some of the moments over the years, but all of those were really big point swings that really impacted not only, of course, the statistical points of the team, but also just the general morale of the team. Now, probably the biggest reason for Ferrari not winning a championship over the past 17 years are due to development missteps and reliability failures. Even when they do have a fast car, they fail to maintain it throughout the season, and that gets them into losing by the end of the season. Of course, in 2017 and 2018, they were quick out of the gate. Particularly in 2018, they were just as fast, if not faster, than Mercedes was at the time. And then by mid-season, development really just stalls, and they weren't able to keep up with Mercedes. 2017 saw some key moments that really ended their title hopes in Malaysia and Japan with reliability issues that cost them a lot of points. 2019 was a really interesting year because they were extremely fast and extremely competitive, and the power unit had some question marks hanging over its head. After there was an internal quiet FIA investigation, their performance really dropped and they were never title challenging again for the rest of the year. 2022, they were, of course, extremely quick, maybe even faster than Red Bull at times, and they were there in a proper championship fight with Max Verstappen and Red Bull, and they were very quick up until about the mid-season. They had engine failures in Spain, Baku, and Austria that really derailed their title chances for the year, and that caused them to have multiple grid penalties. And then, of course, just as the season went on, Red Bull just absolutely outdeveloped them and started the dominance from the second half of 2022 to the 2023 that Red Bull saw. After a really promising 2022, 2023 had high hopes, and it really just lacked a lot of pace and reliability. The team did. They had many problems in Bahrain, Spain, Austria, and Monza, and it showed that they just had not fixed their prior issues. Of course, in 2024, they were decently competitive to start off the season, and then they put a upgrade on the car in Spain, and that really, in hindsight, cost them the Constructors' Championship because that set them off course for quite some races, and by the end, after the summer break, they were actually the ones to score the most points. So how things could have been a lot different in 2024 had they not made that mistake with the upgrade. And now in 2025, the car they brought this year is a fast car, but it's in an extremely narrow window. Of course, we saw that in Hamilton's sprint win in China, but it's very inconsistent, it's difficult to drive, and it's even slipping behind the Williams at this point. Now, maybe a less talked about reason for Ferrari's struggles over the years, but still a very prominent reason, are the multitude of driver errors and mistakes that we've seen across their drivers over the years. And, you know, even some of the best drivers out there have cracked under the pressure of driving for that team. The two drivers that I want to talk about are Sebastian Vettel and Charles Leclerc. Starting out with Sebastian Vettel, of course, we have to talk about 2017 in Baku when they had a pretty competitive car that year, and they end up colliding under the safety car, Vettel and Hamilton, and then Vettel just drives alongside Hamilton and crashes into the side of him. So that, was not good. That cost him points and cost him a penalty, and it really just showed the pressure getting to Sebastian Vettel. 2017 also saw the Singapore Grand Prix where first lap crash wiped out both Ferraris, which was not a particularly good scenario there. In 2018, in the German Grand Prix, one of the biggest moments, particularly of that season, was when Vettel crashed from the lead in changeable wet conditions, and that was a big costly error because Hamilton went on to win that race despite starting way down the order, and that was definitely a moment that changed that championship. Also throughout that year, there were many moments where Vettel had some errors in Italy, Japan, and the USA that cost him a lot of points over the course of the year. Now, Charles Leclerc, we've only seen him kind of fighting for a title once in his time in Ferrari in 2022, and when we did see that, we did see a really big moment in France where he spun out and crashed while leading, and that was a really key moment for that championship in 2022. We also saw in Imola of the same year that he was pushing a bit too hard and he had an unforced error and caused him to spin and lose even more positions, which was just unnecessary. 2024, while not really fighting for the title but still an unnecessary mistake, he crashed in qualifying, and in Canada as well, the team had a really challenging Canadian Grand Prix last year. Sainz spun and crashed, and they just had many issues then as well. Leclerc was really struggling, and it just was not a good time as well. And looking at Spain of 2024, Charles Leclerc also just could not get to grips with the car, and he just kept saying that there was something wrong with the car. But that was a key moment for him as well that year. So we've talked about some some of the big reasons for why Ferrari's title hopes have kind of fell away over the years. But what were some of the key years where hype really turned into heartbreak? Ferrari's expectations have certainly been sky high over the course of time, and pretty much every time they just collapse under the pressure. Taking a look back in 2010 going to 2011, they nearly had the title in 2010, so expectations were quite high going into the 2011 season, but Ferrari really struggled to keep up with development in 2011, and it allowed Red Bull and McLaren to outdevelop them. One of the few times where maybe Ferrari kind of overachieved was in 2012, and that car was not a particularly good call, but Alonso managed to get that car into positions it didn't really belong, and it allowed them to fight for the title despite not having the fastest car. Going from 2012 to 2013, because they had a title fighting year the year prior, they had big hopes, but it was a huge flop. Red Bull absolutely dominated, Ferrari struggled, and it was just another year of heartbreak for Ferrari. Going into 2017 and 2018, both had very strong starts to the years, fighting Mercedes for the title. However, due to the things we've talked about, reliability, driver mistakes, and strategy failures, all caused the title campaigns to fall by mid-season. And, there were high hopes going into both of those years. 2016 was a decent year for them, and they were hoping to hopefully fight for a title. And then, of course, 2017 was even more promising, so 2018 should have been, even better, but each time they have just fallen flat. Going on to 2019, of course, from 2018, when they had probably the fastest car at one point, and then it really just fell away. They were hoping to have another championship bid, and they had a really great start to the season. Again, a really fast car, but then after that FIA investigation into their engine legality, that performance mysteriously dropped, so very interesting there, but that was another heartbreak year for Ferrari. After that, Ferrari didn't really recover super well again for a few years until 2022, and that set up a great deal of expectations for 2023, since they finished 2022 as Red Bull's main rival. But then, of course, 2023 was not a good year for Ferrari. Red Bull absolutely dominated, and it was a challenging year. But they were the only team to beat Red Bull that year, so that caused there to be a decent amount of hype going into 2024. And going into that year, it seemed like Ferrari under Fred Vasseur's leadership was starting to get better operationally. They had 2023 only non-Red Bull win. They had better strategy, they had decent pace, and they seemed to be on a good trajectory going into 2024. But then, of course, McLaren leapfrogged them, and that development misstep in Spain really derailed their championship hopes. Now, going from the end of 2024 to 2025 was maybe the most hype that I've seen for Ferrari and the time that I've been watching them, and even I was very much on the Ferrari bandwagon, because it really looked like they were on a good trajectory going into 2025. They were there or thereabouts at the front of the field, and they scored the most points from the summer break onwards, but their 2025 car has been extremely peaky, inconsistent, and they've been having more operational and strategy errors that are causing lots of problems again, and causing Ferrari's dreams to be ruined once again. So that leads me to the final question. Will Ferrari ever win a championship again? Now, let's be honest, it's not that Ferrari can't win again, but there's really no recent precedent of Ferrari executing on all fronts, between the car development, the strategy, the drivers not making mistakes, and them being able to outpace their rivals. When you take a look at teams like Red Bull, who are nearly perfect on the operational side of things with things like pit stops, we take a look at Mercedes' recent proven track record and just a really pretty bulletproof team up until the past couple years, and then of course McLaren's recent resurgence, Ferrari just looks chaotic by comparison. For a team with all of the resources, talent, and history that it has, they somehow find a way to self-destruct when it matters most, whenever they do actually have a competitive car. So, will they ever win again? Unless something fundamentally changes at Maranello, it's hard to say yes.